So, hi everybody. My name is Justin from Party Rental Knowledge. If you don't know, I help out party rental companies become smaller or don't get smaller. They go from small to big. Just trying to put a bunch of information out there. Today's video, I'm talking to Alex from Cossio Insurance, Alex Cossio. So just let him take it away. We're talking a little bit about insurance today. Here you go, Alex.
I appreciate it, Justin. Yeah, my name's Alex Cossio with Cossio Insurance Agency. We've been in around the amusement industry since 1984. So we've kind of specialized in different programs. Started out with paintball and airsoft, and then kind of transitioned more into the party equipment rentals and indoor inflatable centers. Also, like family fun centers as well with go-kart tracks. So we really specialize in these hard-to-place risks. Usually very small premiums, but they all add up. So we were acquired by Brown & Brown, which is the sixth largest P&C agency in the United States. That was back in 2018. So we just kind of had that new support system. They have the ability to write things that obviously we can't, more in the standard market, whether it's personal, auto insurance, homeowners, also financial planning, and employee benefits. So it's good to be part of that bigger organization, but we still have that nice personalized touch of a small family-owned business.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's pretty cool. So I'm not gonna tell everybody where I heard about Cossio because you pretty much hear from them everywhere. They're one of the leaders in the insurance world, and you can ask them any questions, and they're going to give you the information as far as policies and general information goes for stuff like this. So I figured I'd ask them to come on, and we'll just basically start out with naming the different types of policies and the different types of coverage that they require. But first things first, like a small company, is insurance required? Is insurance required?
So yeah, if you want to set up at a school or a park, somewhere in like a public area, they're going to require that you have that insurance. Normally, it's going to be at least a minimum of $1 million per occurrence. But if you're just doing backyard parties, I know that's something that a lot of these operators get frustrated with. Is they see that $75 bounce house rental. It's somebody that's uninsured. But if you're just going to somebody's backyard, a lot of times they're not even asking you if you have insurance. They just see a guy with an inflatable in the back of their truck, and they say, "Hey, can you come set it up for me?" So in those types of instances, people have homeowners insurance. So if there was an injury on their property, that's where you're supposed to file it first. But again, it's one of those things where if you have these renegade guys out here, it just makes the industry look bad. So usually, that's one thing that a lot of people will use as a selling point. Say, hey, look, we're licensed and insured. In case, God forbid, something does happen, we do have a policy in place that will pay for it. So, these renegade guys, they have no defense cost coverage. So if there was a lawsuit filed against them, they're paying for it all out of pocket.
So if they own a house, maybe their house is on the line. If you own the vehicle
Right.
and all your equipment's on the lines, you're going to have to liquidate that, and you don't get full price for it. So
right. And that's something we can get into that later, but that's something that we always recommend. Even if you're a brand new company, start an LLC, separate that liability from your personal assets to something that's in the company name, so that way they can't pierce the veil and try to come after your personal assets.
Sometimes you got this 18-year-old kid that just has a bounce house, and they're just out there trying to make some money, and then they, what I mean, they get hurt and they don't have insurance, and they're totally liable for it. But now, let's just talk about the different types of coverage there are that you do, like the different policies you have in place for different things, and because what you do is basically the average for everybody else. You do have some hidden gems in there too, but for the most part, this is the type of coverage pretty much you're going to be looking at, and the type of things, information you're going to want to know from any insurance company.
Right. Yeah. So first things first. A lot of times, what we ask these people is what their intentions are with the company. What type of events are you trying to set up at? But normally, just off the top, for every single operation, they're going to always look for that general liability policy. That's that $1 million per occurrence. Usually has a $2 million aggregate limit. So a lot of times people see that on their insurance policy and they think that they have $2 million worth of coverage, and that's not the case. So the biggest limit, the most important thing you want to look at is your per occurrence limit. That's the most that'll be paid out for one claim. And the aggregate limit is going to be the maximum amount that will pay out the entire policy period. So in theory, if you were the worst operator ever, you could have two $1 million claims within the same policy period, and it would still be covered. So if there's a deductible involved, obviously you'd have that type of out-of-pocket cost, but that's what that policy is for. If in case you get sued for either bodily injury or property damage, which is another side one. If you go to some celebrity's house, you're setting up a tent, you scratch their floors, their beautiful marble floors. I mean, that's something that would be covered under a general liability policy. So that's also the policy that if you go to a school or a park, they're going to ask to be named as an additional insured on your policy. And so you need that certificate of insurance, that endorsement to basically get into the door there and set up for your event.
Here's a quick one, because I know about this, because I told you I know about insurance, but I don't know everything. But some companies charge you for the additional insured for the day and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure Cossio doesn't.
No,
And they just add it for the paperwork and just send it to you pretty lickety split. Just don't do it the day of. Don't blow them up the day before.
You have the ability to do it the day of, and we actually could turn those around. We actually have people that work over the weekends as well. So if you have any last minute requests, get a last minute job. But yeah, we don't charge for the additional insured certificates. We actually have a blanket endorsement that's included in that policy, but it's kind of part of the negotiation process when we're trying to put the program together for you guys. Because that obviously you have some people that have tons and tons of events. They need hundreds, if not thousands of certs each year. So we definitely take that into consideration. We try to make it very easy. And the only time where you might see a delay is if we actually have to get an endorsement, and that's an actual change to the policy. So sometimes that might take a day or two, but normally we actually have the ability to go ahead and issue those at the same time.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
All right. So now back to more policies and different coverage and what they cover.
Okay. Well, I mean, we kind of went through the basic setup on a general liability policy. There's definitely other coverages that you can add to the liability policy. A lot of people don't think about them. So, one thing I would usually ask if somebody has employees, I would say, hey, when you go set up these events, do you provide attendance with them, or do you basically go set it up and then you leave and then come and take it back down? But if you're providing attendees, something we also recommend is the sexual abuse and molestation coverage, which can be endorsed onto that liability policy. Normally, that's subject to basically requiring that you have background checks on your employees, which is always a good practice just in general. But again, that's going to protect you if you or one of your employees is accused of molesting or abusing one of the people that uses the equipment. So, it doesn't seem like you would necessarily need it. Everybody thinks that they're going to be, okay from that type of exposure, but God forbid you do get somebody to accuse you for it, and if you don't have an endorsement, if you don't have the endorsement, you're going to be paying for that lawsuit out of your own pocket because your liability policy is not going to cover it.
So you're telling me about this the other night too, and you're saying if you pretty much just drop off the bounce house and they're the operator and they're watching the unit and your employees aren't there, but for drop off and setup, you don't really necessarily need that because what could happen? But if you're doing pay for play events and you're staffing these events wherever, colleges or anything, because I know for a fact you can get some harassment or sexual harassment charge at a college for just saying some wrong thing to one of the females walking around, or if you're a female saying it to the males around, be sexually correct here or politically correct. So
so that's usually the thing, though, is, if you supply the attendance, they're helping people onto or off of the equipment, they touch them the wrong way. That's something that could be misconstrued, and boom,
whatever happens, man.
Yep.
So that's interesting. So there's other things going on too. You with the liability insurance. So the inland marine, or am I saying it right?
Yeah, inland marine. Yeah, that's not part of the liability policy, but that's actually what you would use to cover your equipment.
Okay, we'll do that separate because I know for the liability policy, you have that special policy in place that has the coverage or the X. Okay, the participant is it accident policy? Right. What is it called? Say it. All right, everybody listen.
All right, so it's called a participant accident. So your participants that are actually using the equipment, that's going to be what that policy is designed for. And the biggest thing that you want is, all right, so basically if you have a liability policy, you're having everybody sign a waiver, right? Everybody signs a rental agreement to hold you harmless. But that policy is not triggered unless there's a lawsuit filed against you. So if there's an injury, they basically say, hey, I have all these medical bills that just piled up because I had a kid broke his arm in a bounce house, or broke his leg in a bounce house, and now I have this giant bill to pay, and I haven't met my deductible for my health insurance this year. So those are the situations where it's nice to have that participant accident policy because they're not looking to file a lawsuit against you. Maybe, for example, it's a church event, right? You don't want somebody that was in your church congregation that gets injured and then now they're going to have to file a lawsuit against your church for it. So a lot
Mhm.
of times having that participant accident policy in place, it just pays for medical bills only. So, and normally it's always set up on an excess basis, meaning that your primary health insurance is used first, and then whatever's not covered, whatever that balance is, that's where the accident policy picks up. And again, it's no fault coverage. If you file a claim against that policy, it does not affect your liability policy whatsoever. But again, it's just, hey, we're so sorry that this happened to you. Go to the doctor. Make sure you go within the first 90 days of this incident, and whatever these medical bills are, we have an accident policy that'll pay for it. And it's not an admission of guilt. You're basically just making sure that you're reimbursing them from any of that out of pocket costs, and that includes the deductibles and the co-pays and all those other things. So
Yep.
normally our policy has a $25,000 limit for that, and that's in excess of their primary insurance. So if their primary insurance covers the first $600 and there's a $400 balance on a deductible, we cover that $400 plus whatever's going to be the balance left on that bill. And
Yep.
that's a
So say they
great
don't
feature.
have any insurance at all. You
Yeah,
cover
so
the
if
whole
they
thing.
exactly, that's the great thing as well. So if it's excess over zero, it's going to be that first dollar coverage. And
Yep.
so places in Texas, Florida, Louisiana, you have a lot of people who do not have primary health insurance. It's a great tool to make sure that you're not getting sued just because they don't have health insurance.
Exactly. Because some people listen. The way I'm going to put this in layman terms and the way I explain it. If I'm wrong, please correct me. If you say you rent your bounce house out and somebody gets injured on it, and now their bill is just say $5,000. It's not a lot of money,
Right?
For us. Maybe it's a lot of money to some people. Because that's the point. It is for some people. So now that $5,000, they can't. They okay. Well, listen, I can't pay that $5,000. There's no way it's just coming out of my pocket.
Right.
I don't have insurance. I'm a single mother. I'm a single father. The stories go on. So what happens is they go and now they go to a lawyer and now they have lawyer fees on top of it.
Exactly.
And then they think that, okay, now they have a lawyer and he might be a good lawyer and they try and milk it for whatever situation it is. When all reality, it all started off with just somebody who really just needed $5,000 to fix their kid's issue, whatever happened because they were playing on the bounce house. And they might even think that the bounce house company's fault. And their kid was doing something crazy, but they're going to argue it to the point where it was your fault in court because they're going to have to try and pay that $5,000 off. Right. But if you have this $25,000 that you could just sit there and listen, this is in case this is for what happens or whatever, for your injuries, like go take care of what happened because you got, you know what I mean? So, and then it doesn't count against you.
Exactly. And the biggest thing with that policy too is that it has a $25,000 limit, but it's per person per covered event. So you don't exhaust that $25,000 just because you have one claim against it. So, it's very robust. There's no limit as far as the number of claims that you file against it, but it's just a great feature to have just in case you do have something like that. The biggest example I would use is you have kids in a bounce house, right? You have 2 or 3 kids, they just butt heads. You have 2 kids that essentially need to go get stitches now because they were just goofing around in the bounce house. Accidents happen. That wasn't the operator's fault in any way. They have a signed checklist saying, hey, you're going to, follow the rules. You're not going to have too many kids in there, but it's just an accident. Kids get hurt all the time. I have a 6-year-old daughter. Trust me, I know she gets hurt all the time on the playgrounds. I know it's not a negligence issue because of the school. It's just kids play hard. So, it's nice to have that as a feature. Again, just say, hey, look, go to the doctor. We'll take care of the medical bills for you. I'm so sorry that happened. But then again, that's also on the operators to make sure that when they go to pick up the equipment, maybe have something on your checklist asking.
That's what I wanted to get into actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Right before you say this, I would so before we get into the other policies, because we covered general liability. General liability is the general thing. If anybody's talking about insurance, you're going to get that plus maybe some other things for your coverage. Right. So what I want to hear from you, because we talked about this the other night and you explained it, is what would you like to see from a bounce house operator that uses Cossio Insurance? What would you like to see them do from start to finish? What would a inflatable delivery look like with presentation of rules before or after you even show up to the job.
Right.
You did this great the other night. I'm pretty sure you could pull it off again. So let's just try and go
Yeah, no
for
pressure, right? Yeah,
it. Right?
normally what you would do is if you have some sort of a software company, we recommend that you start out, even if you're a brand new company, just look into these software companies like Event Rental Systems or Inflatable Office.
And you give
Those
discounts too, don't you?
we do. But the biggest thing there is that you're going to get a rental agreement that's signed, whenever they go and go ahead and book the event. Because we found that that's one of the biggest things that people forget to do, the little things like that, just getting a signed rental agreement. Because like we talked about before, your rental agreement has essentially a waiver built into it, right? So it's going to hold
Mhm.
you harmless if there's an incident at the event. But if you don't have a signed rental agreement, you don't have a signed waiver. You're basically setting up this equipment with, hey, I hope nothing happens. You're just crossing your fingers, and then that's it. And that's not a good
Yep.
business strategy when it comes to risk management.
There's no
So,
strategy.
yeah, exactly. So get your rental agreement signed on the front side. If you have any type of safety checklist that you do when you set up the equipment, uh, you know, if it's you yourself doing it or one of your employees that's doing it, have a checklist. Are the stakes buried far enough in the ground? Did you put cones over the stakes? Is there any other type of additional safety measures that you can take? Go ahead and document all that stuff. And another thing that we always recommend is you just take a picture of the setup. If this is something that we saw in Florida, actually, where people moved the setup. You set it up in one spot next, maybe on the grassy area next to the pool, and then you come back to pick up the equipment, and all of a sudden it's sliding into the pool. And obviously that's a huge liability issue. You don't want to ever see that.
Yep.
So if there was an issue where somebody was injured, at least you have a photo showing that, hey, we had this taken care of, we set it up correctly. And then just to kind of follow that up too, is just to make sure that the people that are renting the equipment, that they actually sign off on the rule set that's specific to the equipment that they rented. So if you have a generic rental agreement, just has a bunch of random items in there, but you don't have all the equipment that you own in your inventory, that's a huge problem for you. So you want to make sure that you're going by the manufacturer's recommended rules. They're usually printed on the equipment, but you can put that onto your rental agreement and just have them sign off on everything, saying, hey, I understand that there's not going to be any backflips in here. I know there're not going to be
Yep.
adults and children bouncing this thing at the same time. I know that there won't be more than X number of kids in this unit at one time. And, signing off, another one, big one is, that the unit's never going to be left unsupervised.
Yep.
A lot of people set these things up at birthday parties and it turns into the babysitter. So
Shut down over the manufacturer's rating for wins.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah. What to do in case you lose power.
yep.
There's a bunch
Where
of
the
things that you can
emergency
do.
exits are.
There you
There's all
go.
kinds of stuff you put on those lists because the way in some states it's even the way the liability I see things are. You're training the person who's receiving the bounce house as an operator.
Right.
And then that person, so now that person's an operator and so if that person wasn't an operator, they wouldn't know the rules. So they're
Exactly.
certified operator. In some states, they make you certify them as an operator, and you have to go to classes to be a certified operator and all kinds of stuff, just to be completely liability correct in certain ways, especially when you're going to big events and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think pretty sure PA is a big one when it comes to
sure.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
You have to be an operator and you have to be a licensed. So if I were to be trying to teach you to be an operator, you got to go to school in order to teach that and be able to train somebody, even if it's somebody in the backyard.
That's
Am
wild.
I right?
Yeah.
Am I right? Or
I mean, I'm sure there is. I mean, I know we talked about this in the roundtables the other day, and I think Pennsylvania was one of the ones that required the certification. So,
well, I know there was a reason for when I worked for another company. This is getting a little bit off topic, but I'm pretty sure that they had they were about to send me out for training over there, and a bunch of other people were trained for certain reasons. I know we weren't supposed to be in Massachusetts, even though we were, because we didn't have those trainings. But that's why I stopped working for that company. But anyways, so back into the bill of stuff. Let's now, like we were talking before, inland marine, stuff like that. And you're talking about the sexual harassment coverage and stuff like that. That's part of the liability, or is it's
so
separate?
the sexual abuse and molestation would be part of the liability policy as an endorsement onto the policy.
Okay.
So the inland marines, which you use to cover your equipment. So that kind of
Is it
ties back into
endorsement?
the whole, the process of what we want to see.
Yep.
When you go to pick up the equipment, this is kind of tying that back in. Is you want to make sure that you're asking the customers, say, hey, did you have a good event? Did everything go well? and then have another line on there asking, were there any injuries? Did anybody get hurt that we should know about? Because at that point, that's when you can offer them that accident policy and say, hey,
Yeah,
just make sure you
that's the real
go.
big point.
Yeah, exactly. And usually with that accident policy, there's a caveat there that you have to go and incur your first medical expense within the first 90 days. So 90 days from that incident happening, your clock starts at 90 days. They need to go to the doctor at some point and incur that first expense.
And the reason you want to go there and ask these people on your checklist. I'm sorry I interrupted everything too. On the checklist, the reason you want to go and ask them is because if they got hurt, they're not necessarily going to want to tell you, and you kind of got to feel it out.
Mm-hmm.
They might still not tell you at all. But if they say, hey, yeah, he got bumped, really his arm's broken, but he got bumped. Mm-hmm. And you just say, oh, well, if there's any injuries, we have this accident policy. Even if nothing happened, you can tell them that you have the accident policy. I don't maybe I wouldn't do that because
you would just want to make sure that make sure that there's an actual injury before you offer it. You don't want to just be
so people don't try and milk it
for no reason. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was about to say that. You probably don't want to do that, but it'd be a good point. Say somebody said, hey, they got bumped or bruised. If you say that to them and you have a good feeling something might have happened or something, or if you want to see show face a little bit more, you could tell them, hey, we have this policy, so if you go to the hospital or wherever, covered.
Exactly.
So that's going to make you look more legit. It's also going to putting them now, hey, it wasn't a bump, he broke his arm.
Right.
Can I see a little bit more into that policy?
Right.
This is a game that doing this says maybe you spend $20K or $5K, whatever the amount of money, and it doesn't turn into $1 million lawsuit or something of that lines. And then when that $1 million lawsuit happens, everybody's premiums go up. It kind of affects everybody for the most people. It affects the industry. So if people in general start limiting themselves and stop it from all this liability and all these situations and nipping them in the butt before they even happen, this possibly can take one of the highest costs in the inflatable industry and drive them down.
Exactly. And that's the whole idea behind the participant policy was, the insurance companies, they love to see it. That's their preference is that they have that first line of defense before they get dragged into it. And again, it's just medical costs. So you're not paying for the attorneys. You're not paying for the adjuster to come out there. You're not paying for pain and suffering. There's all those other things that would be included into a liability lawsuit. And, it's basically on the person who was injured, on that party, to prove that you were negligent in some way. So again, that's why they have to sue you for it, right? They got to go through the whole long drag out long court process.
And you offering medical coverage.
What's that?
And you offering medical coverage, it's a little bit less negligence too.
Oh, it's not about negligence. It's just, it was an accident. That there's a big difference between whether you were negligent or whether there was just an accident. And you don't want to be using your liability policy for an accident. You want to save that for, God forbid, you forget to stake the inflatable down. And that's the reason why you had this giant injury. But if it's something where it's like, hey, so kid has to go get stitches, a kid breaks his arm, that's something that you want to pay for, just the medical bills, and it gets paid quickly. That's the big thing. Is it's paid within a few weeks.
If any one of my subscribers forgets to stake an inflatable down, I will give you a free month of training. Just for free. Don't forget to stake an inflatable down. And that it's gonna be hard training. A lot of yelling and screaming. Don't forget to stake an inflatable down.
Yeah. And that is something also with the participant accident policies. One of the few tweaks that we made to it was actually to cover independent contractors. So if you don't have a W-2 employee, you have a 1099 guy that's just helping you out, you can actually use that participant accident policy to cover an injury. It's not going to give you all the bells and whistles of, say, a workers' comp policy where you get lost wages, you get all those things. With the participant accident policy, it would just be limited up to $25,000. So it's a good way if your guys do get hurt, they got to go to the doctor. You can use that policy to get them taken care of. And again, it's just on a reimbursement basis.
So back to what the question was. It was just, what do you want to see when you drop it off? Listen, everybody should have, if you don't have a software system just because you want to make your life easier and have everything done good for you, just everything out of people, online booking, the all crazy, all the other reasons for it.
Mm-hmm.
Another good reason is you can actually save. What is it, 20%? You guys do 20% off your insurance? What do you guys do for off Cossio for having like ERS or something?
Yeah, it was 10%.
10%. My bad. Save 10%. That's a lot of money when you're talking about 10 grand. It's a grand. That's $1,000 every year if you just have a
Exactly.
$10,000 policy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one reason.
Yep.
One of the things you want to do too after you have that, you want to present that policy online. You want them to read your contract. You want them to see your contract, sign your contract,
Mm-hmm.
sign the rules, and do all that. And then I personally do. They don't require you to do that again during a setup, but I tell people to go. They bring a paper copy and do that as well. And
Absolutely.
a lot of people tell you to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
even if you're not going to do a printed waiver, you should definitely do a signed rule sheet. That's different. You definitely have to do the rules upon delivery. If you're not going to do an extra waiver, definitely the
Right.
rules.
And then also you can go above and beyond that too, and just post a copy of your waiver in front of every unit that you have. And that way it's almost like if you're going to a corporate event or a fair or a festival, it's the same concept as that pay for play where it's
Yep.
not everybody's signing a waiver, but you at least have to read it before you get
Yep.
onto it. So have one at the front of the unit and maybe at the start of the line before they get on. So that way, and again, take a picture of it. So that way you could show that, hey, they had to walk by 2 different waivers before they even got onto the unit. In order to participate on it. So, pictures are always great. I think it's probably one of the better things you could do that's very simple. Just one, you can show that the setup was done correctly and then all these other rules and procedures were put in place and it's documented.
I'm pretty sure ERS has it so you take pictures and put it right in the driver's app too. It's part of
That's
the
perfect.
requirement thing too. I'm not, don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And if not, I'm taking pictures anyways to throw on social media all the time. I like to post a lot all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's if you're responsible when you take these pictures and you're taking those pictures and putting them on social media, you start thinking to yourself, okay, I have a cone on every single steak. I have the mat out there. I have the unit is clean. It's not near a pool. It's not near where it can get damaged or anything.
Mm-hmm.
My sign's there. So this way you can see everything. So now everything's responsible because the way I see it, when I post all these pictures on social media, I don't know if my insurance company's looking at it or not. You know what I mean? So do you look at people's Facebooks?
All the time.
All
All the time. Yeah. You guys,
there you
yeah,
go.
it's funny, man. You have a lot of people that say, "Oh, I don't have that unit." And you're like, "Well, it looks like it was set up at this event." So,
Yeah, it's like, well, like
timestamps on there, they don't lie.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like, listen, they're throwing it out here. Don't lie to your insurance company because it's going to make us more problems for
Right.
for the industry. The more people lie, the more problems it just brings down on the rest of us. Like the few bad apples ruin the barrel. So
it's been a big frustration, with us because it for the most part, I'd say the industry has never been really required to be transparent with things that actually matter. The liability policies are based on your annual gross revenues, not your gross profit, not your net profit, your gross revenue. And so many people would try to suppress that information. I'm only doing 10,000 a year, but I have 40 units. And you're like, it doesn't seem like it adds up, man. You're in Florida, you should be able to operate year round. So, questioning them on that, I know that was something that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and understandably so. But if we have to call you out on it, it's one of those things. It's an uncomfortable conversation. So to your point, just don't lie about that kind of stuff. Just be upfront with it, so that way we can do our jobs and find you the best rate and make sure that you're covered properly.
exactly.
So we
You
don't want you to get into a situation where you're
Yeah.
misrepresenting on an application and that's insurance fraud. We don't want to get into that.
Exactly, because people sit there and they're like, hey, okay, so they have one C4 combo under their insurance company, but they own 3 of them, but they only have one covered so that they could say, that was that one.
Right.
So that a lot of people do stuff like that. Like, don't do stuff like that. I shouldn't even told you people like that. But no, serious in all seriousness. But so back to your policy. So you said there's like add-ons, endorsements.
Yeah, there's endorsements.
That's what an inland marine would be. Is an endorsement
That's a completely separate policy, but that's the policy that's in place for covering your equipment. Yeah. So if your
See, I'm
equipment's
still learning all the different
stolen,
lingo. It's different. There's different things, but you want to know all these things because regardless if it's a policy or an endorsement, these
right,
things cover certain things happening in certain situations.
right,
And so that's why they very much pay, like they're very much, you want to look into all this stuff because and you might not need them all right away. Like that's what we
mhm,
were talking before. Like certain things, like if you're not doing pay for play events, you don't really need a sexual harassment endorsement for the most part.
mhm.
Um, or sexual molestation, I think you said it was.
Yeah, sexual abuse, molestation. That I
Yeah.
would recommend that highly if you supply attendance with your equipment, whether it's a
Yeah.
backyard party or not. Just if you supply the attendees, just think about that as something to potentially add onto your
Exactly.
policy. Just because it's one of those policies that's or endorsements that's just so inexpensive that you'd be
Yeah.
kicking yourself if you have a situation like that and it would have only cost you $500 to
So
add it for the year.
now I said it like 5 times. I don't think we talked about it once. Inland marine.
Inland marine, okay. So inland marine is your property coverage for equipment that's mobile. So if it's a property policy, that just means it's being at a fixed location. So if you have like an indoor inflatable center and it's not going to go more than 100 feet beyond the premises, that's just a strict property policy. But with the inland marine, it means you're setting it up away from your warehouse. It's going to cover it while it's in transit as well. So that's if it's stolen, if it catches on fire, somebody destroys it somehow. So vandalism, that's another big one.
So if you're delivering bounce houses to people's backyards, you should probably have inland marine.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's basically it's actually a requirement if you have a loan on the equipment. So if you buy it brand new, you take out a personal loan or business loan for it, that bank is going to require you to have inland marine coverage on that equipment while it's still being paid off. So a lot of people, that's the only time they buy it is when it's required, and they might not even cover the entire value of their inventory. They might just cover those new units, but to be honest with you, within our program, it's so inexpensive to get the full thing covered that it just make it easy and just go ahead and cover everything. That's including
Yep.
like your blowers, your extension cords, your ladders. All that stuff can be covered as business personal property under your policy. And the whole idea is that if, God forbid, you have a storage facility and it catches on fire and you lose everything,
Yep.
that's what that policy is going to be to cover that catastrophic loss. And another bell and whistle that's actually included within that policy is the business income limit. So that way, not only did you lose all of your units in the fire, but now you can no longer rent them to make money. So that's something that, again, is a
That's
little
included in
nuance
the
to that
policy.
policy. That's on the inland marine policy is the business income limit. And I don't know if every single carrier out there does that. That was something we wanted to include in our program.
And that goes off the value of the unit, right? And then the value of the unit depreciates over time, so the value that it costs to cover those units depreciate as well with it, right? It's part of
So
your
with the way our policies are written, at least the ones that we usually use, they're going to do it on a replacement cost basis. So it's whatever it costs to replace that unit with a brand new one or the most similar type of unit to that one. So whatever you paid for it
okay.
is more or less what you're going to put as the insured value for it. You're not going to
Okay.
put in there, okay, well, I bought this in 2018, so I'm going to knock off a couple hundred or no, a couple grand off of it. It's like, no, whatever it costs to get the same unit or a similar unit, that's what you put on the insurance policy. And that way you're
All
making
right.
sure that you're fully insured because
That's something I didn't know.
mhm.
So that I'm glad I just figured that out today. Every time I talk to this man, people learn something new.
Yeah,
So
so that policy is very, very inexpensive as well. You're probably talking like a minimum premium of, I don't know, $350 a year. Like it's very cheap. So if you have a couple hundred or a couple of grand worth of equipment, 20 grand, 30 grand worth of equipment, you're probably looking around that price. So you're small guys, even if you're not really anticipating it, we talked about this earlier. It's like buying car insurance, right? Like you can get liability only, or you can get the coverage for collision, the damage to the actual
yep.
car. That's something that you always want to think about when you're getting into this. Is how can I protect myself, but do it in a way that's not going to be like I'm buying insurance for everything. Like you only
Yep.
need to really cover if you're starting out. Your general liability policy, your participant accident policy, in the marine would be the trifecta that you normally start out with.
That's what I was
Uh,
getting at pretty
mhm.
much. But then there's still a bunch of other stuff like okay,
Oh yeah,
umbrella policy.
right. So an umbrella policy, and that's basically going to be an overarching policy above all of your liability policies. So that's including if you have a commercial auto, if you have general liability, workers' comp. So if you exhausted that policy limit up to say $1 million, If you have $1 million umbrella, that means it's just going to pick up from that $1,001 up to the next, $2 million, whatever it is. And that's an umbrella policy. Whereas there's another policy out there. It's called an excess policy, which only is over your general liability coverage. So it doesn't apply to your commercial auto or your workers' comp. So you guys that are in Texas, if you have any type of mechanical rides and you need to have that $1.5 million per occurrence limit, usually you'd either have to have the carrier that would play ball and give you that limit, or you'd have to get $500,000 or $1 million worth of excess coverage on top of that policy in order to satisfy that requirement. So there's a couple of different variations out there. Usually it's cheaper to go the excess route because it's not going to be over all of the other policies. But if you're in like the general business world, and umbrella policy is usually what you would see. But at least in our industry, it's more so the excess.
Interesting, yeah, because I actually hear that more often than I do hear umbrella around this industry, and that explains why completely. That's awesome.
Yep. So,
what other little things that we kind of touched on everything? There's got to be something.
Well, the other policies that you would need, potentially if you have employees, again, you'd be wanting to look into a workers' compensation policy. Some states have different requirements for, whatever the threshold for what you need to have the coverage. Sometimes it's a number of employees, sometimes it's a number of payroll or amount of payroll. But a lot of times the owners will exclude themselves from coverage because you're not going to really sue yourself if you get injured or you get killed. So a lot of times what you could do is like a backfiller for that is to get a business travel accident policy, and that's going to give you AD&D coverage, give you like an emergency evacuation benefit or emergency medical evacuation benefit, pays for reimbursement for if you have to ride in an ambulance or if you have to go to an emergency room. But it's very inexpensive. It's employer paid, so it's a way for you to give your employees, whether they're W-2 or they're 1099 subcontractors, you can cover all of them under the same policy and give them benefits. So I know I posed that question in one of the groups here. It was just like, hey, would you guys even offer benefits? And it seems to me like most people would, but they just can't justify the cost yet. So having that as a policy, it's AD&D coverage at the end of the day. It's a very inexpensive version of life insurance, but gives them that death benefit and then those other things because they're out on the road all the time. In case they need to be airlifted to a hospital or something like that.
Here's a thing from an operator standpoint. I don't know if you know about this, but say you go to a school and stuff like that and you have employees, they want to see your workman's comp insurance as well.
Exactly.
So that's something they want to see that those people are covered, not just your equipment's covered, their school's covered.
Exactly. Yep.
Because if that person trips and falls while he's on the job on their school, they want to make sure that they're covered. Right?
Exactly. Yep. Right. Yeah. So, that's the workers' comp is going to cover your employees. It's not going to cover their employees. But if there's an injury to your people while you're setting it up, that's definitely going to be something that the workers' comp would cover.
Exactly.
And the biggest thing for that, too, is it'll get you the lost income or the lost wages. So, obviously being out of work, you're going to have to pay for bills still. So that's one of the main key components of a workers' compensation policy.
Yep.
But, other things that you guys could consider, commercial auto policies, which is, it's always a point of contention in this industry because most people think that they can just use their personal auto policy to make these deliveries. You have other people that say, oh, I have a business auto policy, which is not the same as a commercial auto policy, believe it or not. So, business auto, basically you're endorsing your personal auto insurance to include business use. But the thing is, that's usually designed for people that are doing like white collar stuff, a realtor or, an engineer. They're just driving to and from somewhere. They're not actually making a delivery and doing pickups. That's one of the key differentiators between that and a commercial auto policy, which is obviously more expensive. But if you get into an accident and there's an injury like that, they could potentially deny the claim because you don't have the right type of auto policy. So, something to consider. There's carriers that will do it. Again, as being in such a niche industry, it's tough to find them that will write the coverage for you. And Progressive is probably one of the go-tos for it. But if you guys have a different market that you're looking to write, we can definitely look into that for you. But I just highly recommend that you guys do that the right way on the front side, so you don't have that issue if you guys have a claim or one of your employees rear ends somebody on the way to make a delivery.
So what would you want to, so I was a little confused by that. So I don't know if anybody else got too. So what would you need in place for somebody to get, if one of your employees were to rear end somebody on the way to a delivery?
So you'd want to have that commercial auto policy in place in order to protect yourself the correct way. without any type of loopholes that potentially could bite you. So,
So say
uh,
you have insurance with Geico or something, just
mhm.
having that added policy for business on top of that doesn't necessarily cover complete business use, is what you're saying.
Not the commercial. So say you're going to run an errand, you're going to the bank to make a deposit. That will be something that would be covered under business use. But if it's something where you're going to set up and take down an event, you're making a
That's
delivery,
commercial.
that's commercial. That's where you need to have that commercial auto policy. And you can endorse a commercial auto policy to have personal use on it as well. So you can cover it for your daily driving. You're not necessarily doing something for the job, but you can still cover it under that commercial policy. So again, it's kind of like, hey, you're going to
Interesting.
start this LLC, move the business assets over there, and get a commercial auto policy for it as well. So that way you're kind of separating everything, so that way it's done correctly and it's done the way that you need to.
That's well needed because I was working on getting that. It's my first year owning all my stuff, so I was working on the truck thing. I know
Mhm.
I got the extra insurance on, but I think I did it backwards pretty much. I should, and this way I don't own it either, so I don't freaking have to deal with it. And business owns it,
There you
so
go.
it's a write off.
There you
I'm
go.
serious. I know
There
I'm
you go.
serious. I've been trying to figure it all out, but it's
Yep.
just you know what I mean. The little thing. Don't anybody listen. Just go for it. Don't be discouraged to start a business. Don't be discouraged to do this. Just learn how to do it the right way.
Right.
That's the biggest takeaway that I could say in life. No matter what you do, bounce houses or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Just do the right thing. Do the
Absolutely.
right thing. Um, yeah, plug yourself away, Alex. Tell them we covered everything pretty much, right?
Well, there's one other policy that I would
Oh
recommend
no,
as
let's
a
go.
no-brainer for you guys. All right, so this is something that's fairly new. Obviously with cyber crime and cybersecurity being at the
Oh
forefront right
yeah,
now.
I forgot about this.
So, small businesses, mid-sized businesses, they're being targeted more and more often because you guys don't have super sophisticated cybersecurity. Probably don't have training procedures in place like you do with these big corporations. But even if you have all of those things in place, you have all these great procedures and training in place. All it takes is you to just open up an email. It's got a virus or some sort of malware, ransomware. You're looking at basically being breached by somebody, and now you have this huge cyber claim on your hands. So what I would highly recommend, even if you guys are very small, if you're processing credit cards in any way, shape, or form, or you have any type of personal information on your employees, or if you're just worried about getting scammed by somebody online because you think it's a legit invoice request and you're trying to wire somebody some money, and boom, you just got scammed. So a
Mm-hmm.
cyber liability policy would cover that. We're actually working a really good partner right now that does even before you buy the policy, they do an assessment of your website to find out if there's any type of vulnerabilities, if your information's on the dark web, if you have weak passwords. They do this whole scan for you. It's like a 30-page document to let you know what you can
Oh
work
yeah.
on, and they actually work with you to fix those issues. So if you have a IT person, somebody that works on your website or whatever, you can actually have them connect and figure out a way to fix it for you. But
That is
those
perfect.
policies are so inexpensive. You're talking, like
Yeah.
$100,000 limit. It's like $250 for the year. It's so negligent when it comes to just how small the premiums are and the
You rather
benefits that you
have
get.
it and not need it than need it and not have it. It's one of those
Exactly.
things. So it's
Nobody thinks that it's going to happen to you. And we were actually ransomware 2 years ago, and they wanted like 100 grand basically to give us access back to our system. We were shut down for like 3 weeks. So
if,
what
if
I
if NASA gets hacked and the Pentagon gets hacked, why do you think you can't get hacked? That's the way I see
exactly.
it. Like I don't. That's the way I see it. So $250, 100, like that's
Yeah.
pretty much the average. Or is it go more up with your bigger company? Or
Well, I would say that for your just starting out company, 100 grand should probably be okay. I think that they give you the
so
statistics on when you apply for the quote, what the
what I
average
what
or the
I'm
median
saying
cost is.
is it's you're just starting out, so 250 gets you 100 grand. But say you've been in it for 10 years, does 250 get you 100 grand still?
Yeah, still, yeah.
Okay, that's all.
So,
That's all I wanted
yeah,
for because
I would.
I like to try and get enough information for the older heads out here because everybody
Mhm,
it's not just for the new guys.
right. And
So
I would recommend that you kind of reanalyze that as you guys get bigger. You might want to
yep.
add another, $150,000 worth of coverage, because I want to say that I quoted one the other day that was it was $100,000 option, and there was a $250,000 option. And I think it was maybe $550 or $600 for the
Yeah.
$250. I mean, so
And
it
they were
was
probably $1 million corporation. They were, or, I mean, a company. You know what I mean? It was probably $1 million company, where it
no,
isn't
I mean,
like
they were. I mean, I think they were probably somewhere in like less than 200,000 in sales. So I would say that
they just
it's
wanted to
not.
be covered.
Well, yeah, exactly, because it's not only the ransom that they demand, but also the fact that you have to hire somebody to go in there and clean up your system, get all the malware and stuff like
Oh,
that.
that's interesting. That could get pretty.
Yeah,
It can be
but
pretty
they
penny.
they handle it from A to Z. So they're going to
Yeah, that's
ask you to even
interesting.
convert it into Bitcoin. And like, do you know how to get Bitcoin? Like, would you as a regular person know how to set that up
I
and do all those things?
I don't know how to do it, but I'm not getting into Bitcoin.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why you let the insurance company handle that, and then you just pay that $250 a year to make sure that you don't have to deal with that headache. So
Sounds like it's almost worth it.
yeah, it's so inexpensive. I was like, it's
No, I
crazy to
mean
me
just
that
from
people
that,
don't have it.
it's worth it no
Hmm.
matter what. I'm
Right.
saying it sounds like it's almost worth it just from that one standpoint, but there's like three standpoints from value here just for that
Absolutely.
one policy.
Hmm.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, I'm glad we covered that one because that was pretty interesting too. There was So now say, does that type of policy cover you? Say you have documents in your warehouse, like say you
Yep.
got that's physical documents too. It's not just
Yeah.
cybersecurity
Yep.
too.
Yep.
So
So it's
yeah,
not just
it's
about
not just if you're online, people.
exactly.
That's actually really. I thought it was, but I wasn't sure if there was two separate policies. So yeah,
Yeah.
that should be back to where we were saying earlier when there was three things you should have. That's actually the fourth you should
I would
definitely have.
agree. I
Yeah,
would agree.
that's because you know what I mean. You took somebody's credit card, you wrote on a piece of paper, you threw it in a file cabinet, and you hired suit 5 years later or 4 years later, and she decided to take it. The card's still active and go on a
Right.
shopping spree. You're
Right.
screwed.
Yeah.
You're screwed if you don't have this policy. So if she decided to do it 4 years later, and you had a policy, how does that work when the crime's committed?
Yeah, so normally you're looking at an occurrence-based policy versus a claims made. So occurrence means that if it occurred during that policy period, then you have coverage. Versus like a claims made, they have to make the claim during the policy period in order for it to be covered.
That's interesting.
So yeah, so you actually see that a lot on the general liability side. Where it's actually on a claims made basis versus occurrence, and that's obviously not advantageous to the business owner. So it's great for the insurance company because they can kind of limit some of their exposure because they have to file the claim during that policy period. But if you're worried about the statute of limitations, that's definitely something to keep in mind because they could always come back and sue you a year or two later before they no longer
So,
can.
so what you're saying is, if it's on a claims made basis for you guys for the
Ours
most,
is
for the most part.
ours is per occurrence. Yeah, so as long as
So
the
if it
incident
occur,
happens during the policy period,
okay,
the
so you could
incident.
start a bounce house company this year.
Mhm.
Somebody can get hurt and the occurrence occurred or whatever, and then they never sued or anything until the next year after you decide you're not going to do this anymore. You'd be
Mhm.
covered.
Exactly.
All right. Just want to make sure that's out there for layman's terms because it took me a long time to figure out insurance talk. So
I'm still
it's
learning too, man. So don't feel
I
bad.
feel you, man. But yeah, so if you guys don't know, I'm Justin for Party Rental Knowledge. I'm gonna try and get some more guests out here. Maybe I'll even get Alex on here again because we could talk about insurance like all day for different situations. Maybe just throw little scenarios out there for everybody because there's different there's so many different things in this industry going on. It's not everybody. It's not one cut dry thing at all.
Right.
So let's hear a little bit from you, Alex. Plug in your business. Tell them why you should go with you, and then we'll wrap this up and call it a night.
Well, I appreciate the having us on. It's been great being here. So if you guys are looking for insurance coverage, our website is CossioInsurance.com. We also have another domain. It's WeInsureInflatables.com. Either one is going to point you to the same place. But if you're looking for an expertise, this is something that we've been doing for a long time. We're the only program still left standing. So obviously, we have the expertise. We know what we're doing. We offer a ton of different bonus features, with digital waivers that we include within our program. So if you guys have a fixed location, that's usually a huge selling point. But we have a ton of access to different markets a lot of people do not have. And again, being part of Brown and Brown, if you guys are looking for coverage on your homeowners, your auto insurance, your RV, your toys, whatever you guys have, uh, we don't specialize in that, but Brown and Brown does, and we can find you somebody that will take care of you, and they're an expert in that field. So, definitely leverage that Brown and Brown affiliation. We definitely try to make sure that we can plug that stuff in. If you guys wanted to offer employee benefits to your people, again, we can find somebody that will to kind of reach out to you and set that up for you. So, we're looking forward to talking to you, and we have a great staff ready to handle any type of requests you have.
Oh yeah. So I'll put the link for his websites in the description here. I'm also going to put a link for the ERS in there too, because that's that software I was telling you guys about that'll give you a 10% discount with your insurance if you go with Cossio. And it's they're both pretty good valued companies. Definitely don't kill me either for saying this, but definitely go and shop around and get quotes, but figure out your value, because not everybody offers the thing Cossio offers, because they're really, really specific to the inflatable industry. They're killing it in that game. Everybody knows who Cossio is, but you definitely want to check out the other companies too and see what they're offering for vice versa and weigh your pros and cons. But if you're going to start weighing things, please understand what you're talking about and weighing. How are you gonna weigh something if you don't like? You know what I mean? Don't think to yourself and be like, oh, well, this seems like the good choice. Start understanding what all these little words and policies and endorsements and stuff like that mean. Like, you want to know what they're covering. Like, this is your homework. This is your industry. This is your job. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Like, you want to know these things. Like, I feel bad for not knowing these fully. And you know what I mean? I know people that have been in business for way too long that don't know all these policies fully.
Right.
So just do your homework, do your research. That's why we did this 55-minute video for you guys, just so you guys can get some serious value for insurance. So maybe we'll do a little bit of shorter one just to kind of get some good information out there quick and fluent for people. But if you stuck by this far, thank you guys for coming to the channel. Like and subscribe if you like what we're doing. Thank you, Alex, for coming. I really appreciate it, for taking your time to talk to me right now.
I appreciate you having me, Justin.
No problem. So have a good one, everybody. Have a great day, night, year. Screw 2020.
It'll get better soon.
Yeah, let's go for 2021.
2021,
everybody,
maybe.
2021.